What's up, guys? Welcome back to another edition of the Quick Bricks NBA DFS podcast, brought to you by the good guys over at Fantasy Legends. As always, today is February 25th. It is Tuesday. We have 7 games on tap in the association tonight. Nice little 8-gamer last night. Hopefully some of you guys made off some cash. It was quite the night. It was a very high-scoring night. Nonetheless, pretty nice little slate tonight. A couple big totals, a couple decent spreads, got a couple big spreads. Just a couple teams on a back-to-back as well. Let's go ahead and talk about the games. We'll talk about the pace. We'll talk about spreads and totals, all that good fun stuff. Game number 1, Hornets at the Pacers. Indiana minus 10.5 here at home. 208.5 on the total. Nice little small low total on this one. It's not really nice, but nonetheless, Indiana coming in as the 22nd fastest team over their last 10. Charlotte 29th. Two really slow teams. That's obviously outbeat the low total here. That kind of tells us a whole lot about this game. Really slow. Pacers play pretty good defense. Charlotte really not that good of a basketball team right now, so probably not going to be just very keen on this game. Probably a good one that you can just kind of scratch off. Next one, Bucks coming in off a back-to-back last night after they went to OT last. Or no, they didn't go to OT last night. Anyway, barely struggled with the Wizards a little bit as a 12 or 13 point favorite. Nonetheless, the Wizards got it done last night on the spread. Now they are going to Toronto to play the Raptors. We got Milwaukee coming in as a 1.5 point road favorite, 232 on the total. Nice big total. Milwaukee coming in, of course, as the fastest team on the season and over their last 10 games. Toronto coming in as the 16th fastest over their last 10. So it is a decent pace-up spot here for Toronto. It's a good spot. Toronto has actually been pretty decent against the Bucks so far this year, so it should be an interesting game. It's a really low spread here, and honestly, I think the Raptors have a really good chance of winning this game. So I think this is a good one. Obviously, it'll probably be the chalkier game of the night for good reason. Thunder at the Bulls next game. OKC coming in as a 6.5 point road favorite against the Bulls, who are fresh off a win against the Wizards. 216.5 on the total. Oklahoma City's 26 over their last 10 in terms of pace. Chicago is 14th. So OKC gets a nice little decent pace up spot here. Chicago's been running with a little bit, a decent sized pace over their last 10 games. 14th right there in the middle of the pack. OKC is generally a slower team. Decently low total, but it's a pretty decent game. I think there's a lot of usage that gets concentrated in this game. So I like quite a few players in this one. Going on, Pistons at the Nuggets. Not a good spot here for the Pistons. Going into Denver. Denver minus 12.5 here at home. 216 on the total. Detroit, the 30th ranked pace team over the last 10. Basically dead last. And Denver 7th, not very far behind at 27th. So two really slow teams. Denver has been playing really good basketball. They play really good defense, especially at home. Detroit is not very good since they dished off all of their players. It's a total rebuild in Detroit, so this is one you kind of don't really want to mess with, but it'll probably have a lot of low ownership because of the big spread. People fear the blowouts, so those are usually your best spots for the GPPs. So there'll be a few spots. Next game, of course, the big one that everybody will be watching, the Pelicans at the Lakers. The Lakers minus 7.5 here at home, 240 on the total. Sorry, 238.5, my fault. It should be 240, and I'm sure it'll probably be there by the time that the game tips. Pelicans coming in as the second fastest team over their last 10. The Lakers are the 10th fastest over their last 10. So, again, two very fast teams. It is a very big revenge game for quite a few players. Lonzo Ball, Josh Hart, Anthony Davis. So that one is very interesting. Obviously, it'll be the chalk game of the night, and for good reason. I mean, it's the highest total by almost 9 points already. So good spot, good, really good game. The Lakers are a pretty decent sized favorite though, so that's kind of interesting. The Pelicans have not exactly been good, but they do play very fast and they are great for fantasy, so we'll keep that in mind. Celtics at the Blazers. Boston minus 5.5 here on the road. I'm guessing that's because Dame is still out. There is not a total, so Dame is out, Kemba is out. Boston coming in as the 13th fastest team over their last 10. Portland is the 12th. So a nice little pace game here. Both of these two teams have run with decent pace over their last couple of games, or last 10, I should say. Spread's fair. No total, obviously, at the moment, but I like this game, actually. And then your late night hammer, the nightcap with the Kings going into Golden State, taking on the Warriors. Sacramento minus 5.5 here on the road against Golden State. Sacramento coming in as the 18th fastest team over their last 10. Golden State 8th. So the Warriors have been playing with pretty decent pace lately. With that being said, let's go ahead and hop right into it. We'll get into the point guard spot. First off, Kyle Lowry at 8.1. 50 or more in his last 4 of 6 games, 32 or more minutes in his last 5 of 6 as well. Gets Milwaukee here on a back-to-back. Nice little pace-up spot here for Toronto at home. In one game versus Milwaukee, played 38 minutes, 32.7% usage rate, 36 points, 4 rebounds, 6 assists, and a block. Kyle Lowry has been playing really, really well lately. As you know, indicative by the 50 or more in his last 4 of 6 games. Just turned it on. He's been playing really well. He's just a really good basketball player. So Kyle Lowry at 8.1 tops the point guard list. Going down, Chris Paul going into the Chicago, 8,000 tonight on DraftKings. 48, 50, 34, and 49, 37, and 50. His last 6 games on the road. Those are his fantasy point totals. Chicago is allowing the fourth most of that point guard spot over their last 10. He has carried a 25.4% usage rate over his last 5 road games, only behind Dennis Schroeder. Chris Paul's been good, been playing pretty good. As you can see, pretty much a floor of about 35 points there on the road over his last 6 games. I'd say that's pretty good. His price is up there. He's 8,000. But we've also seen him, top 48 in 4 of those 6 as well. So I think there's decent value at 8K even still. Even in here in Chicago. Chicago allowing pretty good amounts of that point guard spot. So Chris Paul, I don't think probably a lot of people will go there. De'Aaron Fox down a little bit lower than Chris Paul at 7.6. Goes into Golden State. Golden State allowing the 5th most of that point guard spot over their last 10. 37 or more in his last 2 of 3 on the road. Over 31 minutes in his last 8 of 9. Carrying a pretty hefty 31.5% usage rate on the road over his last 5 games. In road travels as well. So De'Aaron Fox has kind of been a little mediocre the last couple of games. So I could fully expect him to have a big one right now. His price has gone down a little bit. He's kind of stayed around that 7.5K range here for his last 5 or so games, which is good. He was on a really good run there for a while. He's kind of, like I said, kind of slacked off a little bit over his last couple of games. He's usually better at home. But nonetheless, it's a great spot. Golden State doesn't play a whole lot of defense. Looks like Draymond could potentially be out once again. So yeah, De'Aaron Fox at 7.6, totally fine with. That's I believe that game will have a decent total. Again, with Golden State running with inside the top 10 pace over their last 10, I believe this game will probably be in the 220-ish, 218 to 222 range. So I think it'll be a decent one. It'll be like that late night hammer, of course. You might want to have some exposure to. Eric Bledsoe at 6.9 has been playing really well as well. 39.5 and 48.3 in his last 2 road games. In one game versus the who's it playing? The Raptors? Yeah, that's right. Raptors. He put up had a 25.3% usage rate. Played only 24 minutes, but he put up 14 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists, and a steal in just 24 minutes. So. 26.4% usage rate over his last 5 road games. Eric Bledsoe, like I said, a shade under 7K there. Pretty good look tonight on the back-to-back. Good spot here against Toronto. It will be a pace up. Obviously, it's for Toronto, and this game will have a pretty decent pace. It's 231.5, second highest total on the board. So, Eric Bledsoe, if you want a cheap point guard that's been playing pretty well on the road lately, Bledsoe's your guy. Dennis Schroeder is 5.7. The guy continues to be, one of the highest usage rates on the team. He is over his last 5 on the road, 28.7%. Chris Paul was only 25.4. So he's garnering pretty much over 3% more usage on the road over his last 5 games than Chris Paul to lead the team. 32, 43, 45, 37, 49.3, and 36 his last 6 road games. Why his price is down to 5.7, I'm not real sure, but this is probably that game that you're going to want to jump back on Dennis Schroeder, especially in tournaments. Chicago, again, allowing the 4th most of that point guard spot. So Dennis Schroeder, 5.7, decent look here on the road against Chicago. On the flip side, the starting point guard for Chicago, Tomas Satoransky, 48 fantasy points in his last game. He has a vendetta against Washington. I said that. Just plays really well. Has put up like 34 and 8 fantasy points against them the last 2 times he's played Washington. It was a revenge game. Nonetheless, he's been playing really well. Over 33 fantasy points in his last 3 of 4, 28 or more in his last 4 or 5, over 30 minutes in his last 7 or 9 as well. It's a decent spot. OKC is not exactly the greatest point guard defending team. Chris Paul is a pretty decent defender, but he's getting the load, So Satoransky, I'm totally fine with. Or you can just go with his counterpart, and Kobe White, who is literally $100 cheaper. Kobe White, 39 or more in his last 3 or 4, 33 actual in his last 2, 18 and 22 field goal attempts over his last 2 games, 35 or more fantasy points in his last 4 of 6. Kobe White's been playing really good, but he's one of those boomer bust guys. His floor, as we have seen, can be pretty low. If he is not hitting his shots, he is not going to put up a lot of fantasy points. Let me put it that way. And his price has now gotten up to the point where he has to have 30 points to basically hit value. So keep that in mind. Jordan Poole's a guy that's been playing really well as well. Obviously, with Draymond out, he stepped up. He's been starting at the point guard spot for 5 or 6 games now. He's 5.4 tonight on DraftKings, 29 or more fantasy points in his last 4 of 6, 22 or more fantasy points in his last 6 straight. Of course, since he's been starting, 25.0% usage rate over his last 2 games, where he's put up 29 and 29, 31 minutes or more in his last 4. We know Sacramento has not been a very good point guard defending team, De'Aaron Fox, or even a shooting guard, to say the least. If Draymond does happen to sit, we're going to have to look at Kai Bowman once again. He's 4.8 tonight. He's put up 22 and 41 fantasy points in his last 2 games with Draymond out. 28 and 32 minutes in those 2, 18.9% usage rate. Kai Bowman's been playing pretty decent. If you want to go a little bit more contrarian, guy that's also been playing well at home, Monte Morris at 4.8, 24.5, 25, and 33.5 in his last 3 at Denver, or in Denver, I should have said. Detroit is very bad. He could potentially get the blowout run. 23 or more minutes in his last 11 of 12 games. He's already a big part of the rotation. So Monte Morris could potentially get a few more minutes. If he does, at 4.8, I think he's a good tournament play. Obviously, he's been putting up decent numbers at home over his last couple anyways, so not a bad look there. Moving over to the shooting guard spot, CJ McCollum at 9K, 76.3, 50 fantasy points over his last 2, right? Without Dames, carrying about a 35% usage rate, 6+ rebounds, 10+ assists, 52 total field goal attempts over his last 2. He's taken 30 and 22 over his last 2 games. I mean, we said this, right? We knew this. CJ is absolutely balling out. He gets another game at home tonight against the Celtics. He's a home dog. So I like CJ again. I hate the price. I love CJ. It's hard. It's a love-hate, but it's one of those things where he's going to chuck up 25, field goal attempts. They really don't have much else. They have Carmelo and they have Hassan Whiteside, and then CJ, is the alpha dog while Dame is out. So keep that in mind. It's a good spot. LaVine at 8.9, 45 or more fantasy points in his last 4 or 5, 36+ minutes in his last 5, 31.3% usage rate in his last 5 at home. Zach LaVine put up 48 last game against the Wizards. He was my top dog. He didn't totally let me down, but I was expecting 55+ or hoping for 55+. Nonetheless, LaVine, pretty good spot again here tonight against OKC at home. Jrue Holiday, 7.9. The guy's been playing really well lately as well. 57.3, 44, and 61 over his last 3 on the road. Over 20 actual in those 3 as well. 6+ rebounds, 10+ assists in all 3 of those games. 9 total steals over his last 5. 24.5% usage rate over his last 5 road games. Been putting up good numbers. I don't think a lot of people will play him. Of course, that game in stacks probably, but him being almost 8K at the shooting guard spot, I think people will either pay up for LaVine, pay up for CJ, or go down. I could be totally wrong, but it feels like nobody ever plays Jrue Holiday. So Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is coming around again, 7.3, over 34 fantasy points in his last 4 or 5, 33 or more minutes in his last 8 of 9. Chicago allowing the 5th most to that shooting guard spot over their last 10 games. 34 or more in his last 4 of 6 on the road. Again, I said I liked quite a few spots in the Thunder Bulls game. It's just got a lot of concentrated usage around a couple of guys. So kind of got I think a nice little game stack of that one is I hate the total. It's not very big. But Chicago being the 14th fastest of their last 10, I think that's a little bit of a pace-up spot. I think we could actually see this game go over. Moving down, Fred VanVleet at 6'8", 34, 37, 41 in his last 3 or 4 at home. 34 or more, so not a bad spot. It is a good pace-up spot here for Toronto. Again, Milwaukee coming in as the fastest team. Back-to-back for Milwaukee again. 36 or more minutes in his last 5 of 7. 20.5% usage rate in his last 5 at home. He has not exactly been good lately. He's been kind of subpar, but I can definitely see this being a good game for him. Nice little breakout, pace-up spot. They're going to need it. Milwaukee, of course, coming to town. They're going to need it. It'll be a good game. Jaylen Brown at 6.6. I don't believe you'll see him this cheap again for a little while, especially after tonight's game in Portland. Portland allowing the 10th most of that shooting guard spot over the last 10. He has put up 39.5 and 38 fantasy points over his last 2, trending really good upwards. 33 or more minutes in his last 7 straight. 24.4% usage rate over his last 5 on the road. Still without Kemba. Tatum has really picked it up. Marcus Smart's played well. Daniel Tice has played well. They need Jaylen Brown to continue to play well. He has played well over his last 2, almost 40 points in both of them. And he's only 6.6 going into a pretty nice pace-up spot here in Portland. So, good spot for Jaylen Brown. Love the price. Marcus Smart right below him at 6.1. Over 31 fantasy points in his last 3. He's put up 31, 31, and 42, I believe. 40, 35, and 36 minutes over his last 3 as well, playing big, heavy minutes without Kemba. Marcus Smart, good spot as well. Bogdan Bogdanovic at 5.6. Golden State, not very good versus the shooting guard, allowing the 4th most over the last 10. He's fresh off a 33.3 fantasy point game in his last game. 20 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, and a steal. 17 field goal attempts. That was the most that he has taken in over 9 games. Bogdan is one of those guys that hit or miss. He's definitely a tournament play. But it's a good spot. It's going into Golden State where it's a decent little pace-up spot for the Kings. I like Bogdan here at 5'6". Damian Lee on the flip side at 5'6" as well. 27 or more fantasy points in his last 3 of 4. 13 or more actual in his last 3 of 4. 3+ rebounds, 3 assists as well. 9 total steals in those games over his last 5. Let me say that. 9 total steals over his last 5. Been playing pretty well. Damian Lee hasn't been actually hitting it out of the park, but he's been one of those guys that's been consistent, been putting up 25 to 30 fantasy points a night. So can look there again at 5.6. Aaron Holiday started last game at the 2 guard, 4.6 tonight. He played 32 minutes, put up 28.5 fantasy points on a 14.4 rebound, 6 assists, and a steal line. Charlotte has not been good against the shooting guard spot. Just like 3 games ago, they were allowing the most to the shooting guard spot, and now they're allowing the 6th most over their last 10. So with that being said, if he happens to get the start again at the shooting guard spot, Aaron Holiday at 4.6 is definitely value punt worthy. Moving over to the small forward, LeBron James, 50 or more fantasy points in his last 7 of 8. In 2 games versus the Pelicans so far this season, he's carried a 28.4% usage rate, 37 minutes a game, 23 points, 6.5 rebounds, 13.5 assists, and 2 steals. So LeBron has not exactly averaged a triple-double, but his assist numbers are way up there, almost 14 a game, 2 steals, obviously almost 7 rebounds a game, 23 points. So numbers are there, obviously 50 or more in his last 7 of 8. LBJ, we know he plays well. It's a good spot. Chris Middleton is a guy that probably nobody will play once again, 7.7 tonight. Toronto has not been very good versus small forwards. Over 46 fantasy points in his last 3 or 4 on the road. Put up 59.8 last night against Washington when Giannis got in foul trouble, struggled most of the game. Go figure, he was my most owned player. 27.2% usage rate in his last 5 on the road. Chris Middleton has been playing really, really well. Gordon Hayward at 7'4", 35 or more fantasy points in his last 7 of 8 on the road. Gets a nice pace spot. 32 or more in his last 8 straight on the road. 20.6% usage rate. Again, it is Portland. It is a decent spot. He's only 7.4. Gordon Hayward's been majorly consistent. Brandon Ingram, nice little revenge game, of course. Forgot to mention him earlier in that passing. 6.8, fairly cheap. In 2 games versus the Lakers so far this season, of course. Now, need I remind, this was not with Zion. 37.6 minutes per game, 32.8% usage, 22.5 points, 6.5 rebounds, 4.2 assists, 2.0 blocks. The Lakers are allowing the 7th most of that small forward spot over the last 10. LeBron has pretty much shifted to full-time point guard. He is actually listed as only a point guard now on DraftKings. Brandon Ingram, yeah. He's going back into LA. It's a good spot. Like Brandon Ingram at the price. Harry Barnes in another revenge spot. Um, 34 more fantasy points in his last 4 or 5. 37 or more minutes in his last 4 or 5 as well. 2 games versus Golden State so far this season. 33 minutes a game, 16.5 points, 4.5 rebounds, 2.5 assists, and a steal a game. Decent numbers. He's only 5.3. He's one of those guys that is never going to lose minutes. He plays all game almost, and we've seen him put up 40 plus easily in a lot of games. He did it just 2 or 3 games ago for me. Put up 48 in a good spot. So Harrison Barnes at 5.3 is definitely a cash play. I know at times his floor has been a little low, but man, the guy continues to put up numbers. OG Anunoby at 4.9. Milwaukee is allowing the #1 most fantasy points to the small forward spot over the last 10 games. 28 or more minutes in his last 7, 28 or more fantasy points in his last 2 of 4. We saw him put up 55 versus Minnesota at home 4 games ago. We know the upside's there. He just has to get moving. It is a back-to-back for Milwaukee. It's a decent spot. Nobody's going to play OG. Could be a spot that he pops off at 4.9. Kent Bazemore at 4.3, 24 more fantasy points in his last 4 of 5, 28 or more in his last 2 of 3, 24 plus minutes in his last 4 of 6. Put up 43 last game against the Clippers. It was a little bit of a blowout. But Bazemore has been a really consistent piece for the Kings once he came over from Portland. He's been playing decent minutes. He's been putting up decent numbers. And it's a good spot against Golden State. On the flip side, Juan Toscano Anderson, the cat that nobody knew, the hometown legend there for Golden State, just made his debut 5 or 6 games ago, I believe. Has been playing really good. 30 and 38 minutes in his last 2. 25 and 28 minutes over his last 2. 30 and 38 fantasy points over his last 2. 10 or more actual, 6 or more rebounds, 3 plus assists, 4 steals total, 3 blocks total. So Juan Toscano Anderson, you have my approval. I did not know you before, and now I do. So if you want to go to Toscano Anderson, I'm totally fine with for Golden State. Archie D'Acano for the Bulls continues to play really well. He's only 3.3. He's played 21 or more minutes in his last 3. He's put up 18.3 and 24.8 fantasy points over his last 2. That is exceeding value at his 3.3 price tag. He's going to continue to see minutes while, while Chris Dunn is out. Denzel Valentine is not playing. They just really don't have anybody else to, Shaquille Harrison, I'm sorry, he's good, but, he's not great. Archie D'Acano is a better defender, obviously. So at 3.3, I think you can still look at him as a cheap play. Moving over to the power forward spot, Giannis obviously is probably going to have a major bounce back. Toronto exactly is not the greatest versus the power forward spot. With Serge there at the center spot, they've been a little bit better defensively down low, especially in the paint. Still yet, it's Giannis. He's put up 57 or more in his last 9 of 10 games. 1 game against Toronto so far this season, 32.5% usage rate, played 36 minutes, put up 36 points, 15 rebounds, 8 assists, 1 steal, and 4 blocks. So, do believe that Giannis will come back for the bounce back tonight. And I'm probably going to say a lot of people will probably jump off of him because of the game that he had last night, and it's a back-to-back. Everything points to bad signs. So I would probably say to hop back on the train or to stay on if you were me. Anthony Davis, nice little revenge spot against the Pelicans. We've seen him go for 60 and 70 against this team already. 10.3 tonight at home. In his last 4 home games, 66.3, 49, 66.8, and 57 over those 4. So obviously he's been playing really well, especially at home lately. AD is fine at 10.3. Domantas Sabonis at 9K against Charlotte. We know Charlotte has not been very good against bigs all the season, for the whole season. 48 or more in his last 2 of 4, 38 plus in his last 4 or 5 at home. Obviously, that 38 plus does not exactly sit well considering he's 9K. But it's just a great spot. Charlotte is not good. He could totally just beast this game. Jason Tatum at 8.8. Price is up there, but he's been playing extremely well. Portland allowing the 4th most of that power forward spot over their last 10. He's put up over 52 fantasy points in his last 3. 35 or more minutes in his last 8 straight. 41 plus in his last 8 straight as well. Just been playing really good. Zion at 8K, strictly a cash play still. It is the Lakers. He is going up against AD. McGee Howard, it's not exactly just an easy cakewalk here. 41 or more in his last 3 or 4, 37 plus in his last 3 or 4 on the road, 27.6% usage rate on his last 5 on the road as well. Christian Wood at 7'3" has still been playing well. Nobody plays him. 37 or more in his last 5 of 6, 31 plus minutes in his last 3 of 5, 21.6% usage rate over his last 5 on the road. They are absolutely going to need a really good game out of him in Denver tonight. It's not the greatest spot, but it's cheap. He gets all the blowout run, and I'm totally fine with Christian Wood. Thad Young at 6.4 is the ultimate cash play lately. 35, 41, and 48 in his last 3, which happened to all be at home as well. Over 30 minutes in his last 8 straight. 13 total steals in his last 5 games and 5 blocks. The guy's just been playing really good. Price is still very manageable. Carmelo Anthony at 6K, 25.6% usage rate over his last 2 games without Dame. 32 and 41 fantasy points in those 2 as well. 32 or more minutes in his last 6 or 7. Carmelo is going to continue to shoot a gazillion times a game. He's going to pick up a few rebounds, maybe a couple steals, maybe a dime or 2. So, I mean, at 6K, he's still totally fine against the Celtics at home. Paul Millsap, 5.1, put up 41.3 fantasy points last game against Minnesota. That's who it was. It was Minnesota. Sorry, I almost said Detroit. That's who they're playing tonight. Millsap, 5.1 tonight. 41.3 last game against Minnesota. He's played now 26 and 27 minutes. His minutes are getting back up to his starter minutes. Grant has pretty much fallen down to his 20 minutes again, 18 to 20 minutes. Millsap is fully back. We know his home and road splits are insane. He's played really good at home and not so great on the road. He is at home tonight. It is Detroit. It is a great spot. He's fairly cheap. 33 or more fantasy points in his last 3 or 5 since returning. Minutes are back up there, totally fine. PJ Washington, 4.9. 34 and 33.8 fantasy points over his last 2. He's put up 16 and 17 points, 5 or more rebounds, at least 4 assists, 4 total blocks, 10 plus field goal attempts in his last 4 or 5 games. He's kind of getting back into a groove. It's not the greatest spot against the Pacers. Nonetheless, he's under 5K. He's put up over 33 in his last 2. Good stuff. Shooting a lot. So you can't really hate it. Grabbing a few rebounds, dishing out a few dimes. The blocks are there. Kyle Kuzma at 4.4 is just a spot, a filler spot in that game stack with the Lakers and Pelicans. 18, 23, and 31 over his last 3 games at home. 23 or more minutes in his last 3 or 5. So if you want to look there, totally fine with it. Nicolo Melli for the Pelicans on the flip side at 4K. 25 or more fantasy points in his last 4 of 6. 10 plus actual in his last 3 of 5. 5 total blocks in his last 5 games. 23 or more minutes over his last 4 of 5 as well. So Melli at 4K has been pretty much one of the first guys off the bench. He's been playing really well. They're going to definitely need his 3 points tonight if they're going to even try to win this game. And that is it for the power forward. Let's move to the center spot. Jokic at 10K, 48 or more in his last 6 at home. Detroit allowing the 4th most of that center spot over the last 10. Don't really have to talk much about him. Hassan Whiteside is definitely a spot that you want to look at. Boston has not been that good against the center spot all year. He has put up 49 and 50 fantasy points over his last 2. Also has put up 49 or more in his last 4 or 5 at home. So Hassan Whiteside, definitely a great play. Another one that has been playing really well is Steven Adams, and he's only 7.2K tonight on DraftKings. Chicago allowing the 7th most of that center spot over their last 10. We know they've been starting an array of folks. Daniel Gafford, who continues to stay in foul trouble every game, it seems like. Felicio, Cornette is still injured, I believe. 34 more fantasy points over his last 4 straight. He's put up 35, 37.3, 56.8, 41.5. 4 double-doubles in his last 5 games with 7 blocks, 10 steals. Steven Adams has been playing really good. Like him quite a bit. Serge Ibaka at 6.5. Milwaukee allowing the 10th most of that center spot over the last 10. Could be without Brook Lopez once again, who started robbing Lopez last night for 33 minutes. Serge Ibaka at 6.5K at home is a really good play. 37 or more in his last 4 of 6. His last 2 games, he's only played 26 and 24 minutes due to the blowout. But if you see, he played 32 or more minutes in his last 4 of 6. So you discount those 2 games, and then he's played 32 or more in the other 4. So minutes should be there as long as the game stays fairly close, which I believe it will. It is Milwaukee. It's only a 1-point spread. So Serge at 6.5, I think is a steal. If you want to punt, Miles Turner at 5K. Charlotte has not been good against the center spot. 35 or more fantasy points in his last 2 of 3 in Indiana. 9 total blocks in his last 5, 6 total steals. So his blocks and steals numbers have definitely been there. If he can just put up a double-double and grab some blocks and steals, 5K would be a really good play. Last but not least, next to last, John Henson at 3.4. played 23 minutes last game. Thon Maker kind of got a little winded there, and John Henson came in for the Clippers. Obviously, it was a blowout, so that could have been a big reason. But he could definitely see blowout run tonight in Denver. 3.4, played 23 minutes, 28.8 fantasy points. 15 and 23 minutes over his last two. Has only put up 13 and 28 fantasy points. So it's definitely a punt play. Just one of those tournament plays. Rolo, of course, if Rolo does not play, Robin Lopez played 33 minutes last night, put up 24 fantasy points. So if Brook Lopez is out, can definitely go there once again, especially if he's going to get 33 minutes. It has been 30 and a half minutes on this pod for your Tuesday edition of the Quick Breaks NBA DFS podcast. I will talk to you guys later this afternoon. Let's win some more cash tonight in the NBA. Good luck.